December 12th, 1942. Rechlin Experimental Airfield, Germany. Oberst Klaus Dietrich traced his finger across the American bombsight's curved telescope mount, feeling the precision machining that spoke of extraordinary manufacturing capability. The device sat before him on a wooden examination table in the Luftwaffe's most secretive testing facility, removed from the wreckage of a B-17 flying fortress that had made a forced landing near Melun, France, just days earlier. The Americans called it the Norden Mark 15. German intelligence had been instructed to recover one intact at any cost, with standing orders issued to every Luftwaffe unit operating against American bombers. The device represented, according to Allied propaganda and American military doctrine, the single most important technological advantage in the strategic bombing campaign. Armed guards had escorted it from the crash site. Special technicians had packaged it with extraordinary care. The Luftwaffe High Command anticipated revolutionary discoveries that would explain American bombing accuracy. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. Dietrich had spent 3 years analyzing captured Soviet, British, and French aviation equipment. He understood optical systems, gyroscopic stabilization, and mechanical computing. What sat before him now was supposed to be impossibly advanced, a miracle of American engineering that allowed bombardiers to, as the American propaganda claimed, drop a bomb into a pickle barrel from 20,000 feet. The problem was that Dietrich recognized almost every component. The gyroscopic stabilization platform used principles Carl Zeiss had perfected in the 1920s. The optical telescope employed conventional lens arrangements. The mechanical analog computer, while sophisticated, operated on mathematical principles that German engineers had understood for decades. Most troubling was the realization forming in his mind as he examined the device's construction. This was not revolutionary technology. This was competent engineering executed with remarkable precision, wrapped in extraordinary secrecy. The story of how the Norden Bombsight came to represent America's greatest supposed secret, and how German engineers would ultimately conclude they had built something better, began not with revolutionary breakthroughs, but with persistent problems that every air force of the 1920s faced. Carl Lucas Norden, a Dutch engineer who immigrated to the United States in 1904, started working on precision bombing problems for the US Navy in 1921. The challenge was straightforward to describe, but fiendishly difficult to solve. When a bomber releases its payload at altitude, the bomb continues moving forward at the aircraft's speed, while simultaneously falling toward Earth under gravity. Wind affects the bomb's trajectory. Air density changes with altitude. The bomber itself may be ascending or descending, turning left or right, experiencing turbulence. Calculating the precise moment to release required solving a complex three-dimensional problem in real time, under combat conditions, by a crew member who might be under fire. Existing bombsights of the 1920s used what engineers called the vector method. A bombardier would estimate wind speed and direction, measure the aircraft's speed over ground using a stopwatch and landmarks, calculate altitude from a barometer, then use these values to adjust mechanical scales that represented the bomb's trajectory. The process required several minutes of steady flight and produced accuracy, measured in hundreds of feet at best, often in thousands of feet under combat conditions. Norden's insight was to automate the calculation using continuous measurement rather than estimation. His bombsight would directly measure the aircraft's actual ground speed and direction using optical tracking of the target itself. As the aircraft approached, the bombardier would keep crosshairs centered on the target through manual adjustments. The rate of adjustment necessary to keep the target centered revealed the aircraft's actual speed and direction over ground, accounting for wind automatically without requiring the bombardier to estimate atmospheric conditions. An analog computer, a sophisticated mechanical calculator built from gears, cams, and differential mechanisms, would continuously solve the ballistic equations using this measured data plus altitude and bomb characteristics. When the calculated release point matched the current aircraft position, an electrical signal would trigger bomb release automatically. The system promised unprecedented accuracy by eliminating human reaction time delays and calculation errors. Norden delivered his first successful prototype to the US Navy in 1927. Initial testing showed promise, but accuracy remained disappointing. The gyroscopic stabilization platform drifted over time, requiring constant adjustment. The optical system proved difficult to use. The mechanical computer, while ingenious, contained so many precisely machined components that even slight wear or misalignment produced substantial errors. Throughout the 1920s and early 1930s, Norden and his business partner Theodore Barth refined the design through hundreds of test flights and thousands of component improvements. By 1931, they had produced the Mark 15, the production version that would serve throughout World War II with only minor modifications. In controlled testing under ideal conditions, the Mark 15 achieved extraordinary results. Flying at 10,000 feet on clear days with no wind, minimal turbulence, and unlimited time to set up the approach, bombardiers achieved a circular error probable of 75 feet. Half of all bombs landed within 75 feet of the aim point. This performance exceeded anything previously demonstrated. The U.S. Army Air Corps recognized the strategic implications immediately. If bombers could actually achieve such precision from high altitude, the entire concept of strategic warfare would change. Precision strikes could destroy specific factories, transportation choke points, power plants, and military installations while minimizing collateral damage. The United States could pursue strategic bombing as a humane alternative to the mass slaughter of trench warfare that had defined World War I. President Franklin Roosevelt, deeply opposed to area bombing of cities, saw the Norden as enabling precision strategic bombing that would target enemy military and industrial capacity while sparing civilian populations. This promise became central to Army Air Corps planning throughout the 1930s. The service campaigned for independence from Army control, arguing that strategic air power could win wars without massive ground campaigns. The Norden Bombsight became the technological justification for this doctrine. It promised what ground commanders and political leaders wanted to believe, that modern warfare could be both decisive and humane through precision application of air power. The Air Corps began manufacturing Norden bombsights through a network of contractors in 1932. Production started slowly, with early units costing over $8,000 each, equivalent to the price of a large house. As production expanded, costs fell, but the device remained expensive and extraordinarily complex. Each bombsight contained approximately 2,000 individual components, many requiring precision machining to tolerances measured in thousandths of an inch. Gyroscopes had to be balanced to prevent drift. Optical lenses required perfect grinding and alignment. Gears needed precise spacing to prevent backlash in the mechanical computer. Most challenging was maintaining this precision through the violent environment of military operations. Aircraft experienced vibration from engines, turbulence during flight, and harsh landings that could jar delicate mechanisms out of alignment. Temperature variations from ground level to high altitude, sometimes spanning more than 100 degrees Fahrenheit, caused metals to expand and contract, changing gear mesh and bearing clearances. Humidity, dust, and oil vapor contaminated precision components. To maintain the bombsights required specially trained technicians, climate-controlled storage facilities, and elaborate maintenance procedures. Every mission required checking the stabilization platform, calibrating the optical system, cleaning and lubricating mechanisms, and testing the analog computer. Even with perfect maintenance, combat damage, rough landings, and accumulated wear meant bombsights frequently required major overhaul or replacement of components. The secrecy surrounding the Norden matched its complexity. Army Air Corps leadership declared the bombsight classified as secret, the highest classification then in use. Bombardiers training on the device took an oath promising to protect its secrets with their lives if necessary. Regulations specified that if a bomber crew faced capture, they were to destroy the bombsight by firing several shots from a .45 caliber pistol into its critical components, or by activating a thermite grenade that would melt the entire mechanism into a lump of slag. Between missions, bombsights were removed from aircraft and stored in guarded vaults under armed protection. Specialized ordnance crews transported them to and from aircraft in covered cases, escorted by armed guards. Bombardiers were forbidden to remove the protective cover until the aircraft was airborne and over friendly territory. Upon landing, the cover went back on immediately, and the bomb site returned to secure storage. Factories manufacturing components operated under strict security, with workers forbidden to discuss their work and subjected to searches when entering and leaving the facilities. General Henry Hap Arnold, commanding the Army Air Forces as war approached, personally enforced these security measures. He believed the Norden represented such an overwhelming tactical advantage that its compromise would endanger the entire strategic bombing campaign. If Germany or Japan obtained Norden bombsights and equipped their own bombers, Arnold calculated that Allied bombing losses could increase by 300% or more. The strategic air campaign might become impossible. Throughout the late 1930s, as war approached, the secrecy intensified. Production expanded to meet the Army Air Force's ambitious plans for strategic bombing, but security restricted who could know about manufacturing, where components came from, and how the complete system functioned. Theodore Barth, Norden's business partner, actively promoted the bombsight's capabilities to justify continued funding. He cultivated relationships with military leaders and key congressional committees, demonstrating the device under controlled conditions that showcased its impressive capabilities. Stories began circulating about bombardiers dropping bombs into pickle barrels from 20,000 feet, a claim that Barth never explicitly made but never discouraged. The legend grew that American bombardiers possessed supernatural accuracy, that the Norden represented a quantum leap in bombing technology, that its secrets were more valuable than gold. By the time the United States entered World War II in December 1941, the Norden bombsight had achieved an almost mythical reputation within American military circles, and among those civilians cleared to know of its existence. What almost no one in American military leadership knew was that the secret had been compromised years before the first combat mission. Hermann William Lang was born in Germany in 1908. He immigrated to the United States in 1927 at age 19, taking a job as a draftsman and inspector at the Carl L. Norden Company's factory on Lafayette Street in downtown Manhattan. Lang was skilled with precision machinery, detail-oriented, and reliable. His supervisors considered him an excellent employee. American authorities conducting background checks found nothing suspicious about a young German immigrant working hard to build a life in New York. What they did not know was that Lang had served in Nazi stormtrooper units in Germany before emigrating. His sympathies remained with his homeland, and when German intelligence services recruiting among German Americans in New York approached him in the mid-1930s, Lang agreed to provide information about his employer's work. The Carl L. Norden Company at that time was developing what would become the Mark 15 bomb site for the U.S. Navy and Army Air Corps. As an inspector, Lang had access to technical drawings, specifications, and prototype components. He understood how the system functioned and had handled every significant component during quality control inspections. In 1938, Lang traveled to Germany for what appeared to be a personal visit. In Hamburg, he met with Oberst Nikolaus Ritter of the Abwehr, German military intelligence. Over several meetings, Lang reconstructed from memory detailed sketches and specifications of the Norden bombsight. His technical knowledge and precise recall allowed him to describe the gyroscopic stabilization system, the optical assembly, the analog computer's mechanical arrangement, and the electrical systems that connected everything. For this information, German intelligence paid Lang approximately $3,000, a substantial sum equivalent to several years' salary for a factory worker. Ritter forwarded Lang's materials to technical specialists at Carl Zeiss in Jena, Germany's premier optical and precision instruments manufacturer. Zeiss engineers studied the American design with professional interest. They recognized the underlying principles immediately. The gyroscopic stabilization used technologies Carl Zeiss had pioneered for naval applications. The mechanical analog computer employed differential gear systems and cam mechanisms that German precision machinery manufacturers had perfected. The optical system, while well designed, used conventional lens arrangements and mirror assemblies. What impressed Zeiss engineers was not revolutionary innovation, but rather meticulous attention to manufacturing quality and systems integration. The Norden represented excellent execution of known principles, built to extraordinarily tight tolerances, with careful consideration of how components interacted. It was, in the assessment of German technical specialists, a very good bombsight, but it was not the miracle weapon American security measures implied. Zeiss had already been developing their own advanced bombsight, the Luftwaffe 7, or Luftwaffe 7 for short. The name meant vertical telescope in German. Development had started in the mid-1930s, independently of any knowledge about American efforts. German designers faced the same fundamental problem as Norden: how to calculate bomb release points automatically under varying conditions of altitude, speed, and wind. The Luftwaffe 7 used similar principles to the Norden, but with significantly different implementation. Instead of separating the stabilization platform from the optical sight, German engineers integrated both functions into a single compact unit. A metal housing contained the gyroscopic stabilizers, mechanical computer, and optical system in one assembly. A tube extended downward through the aircraft's fuselage, terminating in a mirror that reflected the ground image upward into a telescope inside the main housing. The mirror moved to compensate for aircraft motion, keeping the image stable while the mechanical computer tracked the target and calculated release points. The Luftwaffe 7's most significant advantage was simplicity. Where the Norden required two separate units that had to be precisely aligned and maintained independently, the Luftwaffe 7 integrated everything into one mechanism. Controls consisted of three large knurled knobs that bombardiers could identify and adjust by feel without looking away from the optical sight. The system could view targets anywhere from 90 degrees to 40 degrees ahead of the aircraft, and up to 20 degrees to either side, giving bombardiers much more flexibility than the Norden's more limited field of view. Maintenance proved dramatically simpler. The integrated design meant fewer connections between components, fewer alignment issues, and fewer failure points. Luftwaffe ground crews could service a Luftwaffe 7 in a fraction of the time required for the Norden's complex dual-unit system. In combat operations, where maintenance had to be performed quickly under difficult conditions, often in temporary forward airfields, this advantage was substantial. After reviewing Lang's information about the Norden, Zeiss engineers compared it to their own Luftwaffe 7 design. Their conclusion, documented in reports to Luftwaffe technical commands, was unambiguous. The Luftwaffe 7 was superior for operational use, while the Norden achieved slightly better accuracy under perfect conditions in controlled testing. The Luftwaffe 7 was easier to operate, simpler to maintain, more reliable in combat conditions, and adequate for German bombing doctrine, which emphasized tactical support of ground forces rather than high-altitude strategic bombing. The Luftwaffe made no effort to copy the Norden design or modify German bombsights to incorporate American features. The information Lang had provided confirmed that German engineers had independently developed similar technology. It validated that Carl Zeiss's approach was sound. Most importantly, it revealed that American claims about revolutionary accuracy were exaggerated. The Norden was a good bombsight, perhaps marginally better than the Luftwaffe 7 in ideal conditions, but not the quantum leap that American security measures suggested. German intelligence services continued running Lang as an agent. He provided additional technical information through 1941 as part of the Duquesne spy ring, a large German espionage network operating in the United States. But Luftwaffe leadership had already concluded the Norden issue was resolved. They had comparable technology. They understood American capabilities. There was no urgent need to steal more information or copy American designs. In June 1941, the Federal Bureau of Investigation arrested Lang along with 32 other members of the Duquesne spy ring in what remains the largest espionage prosecution in United States history. Lang faced trial on espionage charges in Brooklyn, New York. The government proved he had transmitted military secrets to Germany, including detailed information about the Norden bombsight. In December 1941, just days after Pearl Harbor, a jury convicted Lang. The judge sentenced him to 18 years in federal prison. If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. The trial was reported in newspapers but received limited attention amid the war crisis. The specific details of what Lang had stolen remained classified. American military leadership knew a spy had compromised bombsight information, but they had no way of knowing how thoroughly Germany had analyzed the Norden or what conclusions German engineers had reached. Security protocols remained in force. Production continued. The elaborate procedures for guarding bomb sites between missions continued throughout the war. Bombardiers still took their oath to protect the secret with their lives. By December 1942, when American heavy bombers began operations against Germany in significant numbers, the B-17 Flying Fortress had become the primary delivery platform for the Norden Bombsight. Each fortress carried one bombsight installed in the nose, operated by the bombardier who sat in the aircraft's plexiglass nose compartment. The bombardier's responsibilities included identifying targets, operating the bombsight, and commanding the aircraft during the bombing run through autopilot connection. The first B-17 seconds arriving in England carried the Norden Mark 7, an improved version of the basic Mark 15 design. Operational procedures required that bombardiers keep the device covered until airborne over the English Channel. Armed guards at air bases maintained bombsight vaults where the devices were stored under lock between missions. Specialized ordnance crews handled transportation. No bombardier was to allow the Norden to fall into enemy hands intact. These security measures meant that when B-17 seconds were shot down over occupied Europe, the Norden bombsight often arrived in German hands as a pile of bullet-riddled fragments or a melted lump of metal from thermite grenades. Bombardiers followed their training and destroyed the devices before bailing out or during forced landings. But the sheer number of bomber losses meant that eventually, an intact or nearly intact Norden would be recovered. On December 12, 1942, Lieutenant Paul Flickinger piloted B-17 Farads, serial number 41-24585, on a mission against railway marshalling yards at Rouen-Sotteville, France. His bomber, nicknamed Wolfhound by its American crew, came under determined attack by Messerschmitt and Fokker-Wulf fighters. Engine damage and battle damage to the airframe forced Flickinger to make an emergency wheels-up landing in a field near Melun, southeast of Paris. The 10-man crew evacuated and surrendered to Wehrmacht soldiers, who quickly surrounded the crash site. Luftwaffe recovery teams arrived within hours. They found Wolfhound relatively intact, with minimal fire damage. Most significantly, they discovered the Norden bombsight still mounted in the nose. The bombardier's station, damaged but recoverable. The bombardier had not been able to activate the thermite grenade or fire enough shots to destroy critical components before evacuating. German specialists carefully removed the device, photographed its installation, and documented every visible feature before transporting it to Rechlin for analysis. When Oberst Dietrich received the captured Norden in December 1942, the Luftwaffe Technical Command anticipated major intelligence breakthroughs. American propaganda had built up the device as revolutionary. Security measures implied capabilities far beyond normal bomb sites. Surely this would reveal technological secrets that explained American bombing accuracy and justified such extraordinary protection. What Dietrich found as he methodically disassembled and examined the American bombsight was simultaneously impressive and disappointing. The manufacturing quality was superb. Every component showed precise machining to tight tolerances. Gears meshed smoothly with minimal backlash. Optical lenses were ground and coated expertly. Gyroscopes balanced perfectly. The device represented the peak of 1930s mechanical engineering and precision manufacturing, but the underlying technology was entirely familiar. The stabilization platform used gyroscopic principles that German navigation instrument makers had employed for decades. The analog computer's gear, trains, and differential mechanisms resembled those in complex mechanical calculators. Carl Zeiss had been building since before World War I. The optical telescope used conventional lens designs. Even the autopilot interface, which American propaganda had emphasized as revolutionary, operated through straightforward electrical servos controlling aircraft control surfaces. Dietrich documented every component, created detailed technical drawings, and prepared a comprehensive report for Luftwaffe headquarters. His assessment was professional and uncompromising. The Norden Bombsight was an excellent piece of engineering. It represented sophisticated systems integration and extraordinary manufacturing quality. Under ideal conditions, it likely achieved the accuracy American sources claimed. But it offered no revolutionary breakthroughs. German engineers had already developed comparable technology in the Luftwaffe 7. The American device was more complex, more expensive to manufacture, more difficult to maintain, and no more effective under actual combat conditions than the bombsight Luftwaffe bombers already carried. The most telling comparison came when Dietrich brought a Luftwaffe 7 bombsight into the examination room and placed it beside the Norden on the wooden table. The German device was noticeably more compact. Its single integrated housing versus the Norden's two-piece design immediately suggested easier installation and maintenance. The three large control knobs versus the Norden's array of smaller knobs and switches indicated simpler operation. The mirror tube protruding from the bottom, while unusual in appearance, provided the German bombardier a wider field of view than the Norden's fixed telescope. Dietrich conducted a detailed component-by-component analysis. The Norden used more parts, required more precise alignment, and demanded more intensive maintenance. The Luftwaffe 7 achieved comparable accuracy with fewer components, simpler calibration, and more robust construction. Most significantly for operational use, the German bombsight could be serviced by regular Luftwaffe ground crews with standard tools. The Norden required specialized technicians, precision instruments, and climate-controlled facilities to maintain its exacting tolerances. The implications were clear to Dietrich and to his superiors at Luftwaffe Technical Command. American security measures surrounding the Norden had been unnecessary. The device represented no technological advantage that would alter the air war. German bombsights were equally effective and actually superior for operational use given their simpler maintenance and more robust construction. The capture of an intact Norden had confirmed that German engineering had independently matched American capabilities, and in some respects exceeded them through better design philosophy, emphasizing reliability over theoretical maximum accuracy. This realization presented an interesting psychological problem for American forces. The extraordinary security measures continued throughout the war. Bombardiers still guarded the Norden with armed protection between missions. Thermite grenades remained installed. The oath to protect the secret with one's life stayed in force, all based on the assumption that the Norden represented revolutionary technology that enemies desperately wanted to capture. In reality, Germany had possessed complete plans since 1938 and had concluded their own design was better. The real secret was not the Norden bombsight's design. The real secret was that despite all the propaganda, despite all the promises of precision strategic bombing, despite the billion-dollar development and production effort, the Norden did not perform under combat conditions anything like its theoretical capabilities suggested. The first large-scale operational test of the Norden bombsight under combat conditions came on March 18, 1943, when the 303rd Bombardment Group attacked Bremen-Vegesack, Germany. Intelligence reports afterward showed the group dropped 76% of its bomb load within a 1,000-foot radius of the aiming point. This represented a circular error probable well under 1,000 feet, impressive performance that seemed to validate years of development and the extraordinary security measures. But wider analysis of bombing results through the spring and summer of 1943 revealed troubling patterns. Across all missions over Europe, only 50% of American bombs fell within a quarter mile of their targets. Many missions produced far worse results, with bombs scattering across areas measuring miles rather than hundreds of feet. The average circular error probable for American strategic bombing in 1943 was approximately 1,200 feet, meaning only 16% of bombs landed within 1,000 feet of the aim point. This was 16 times worse than the 75-foot accuracy the Norden achieved in testing. More problematically, it was essentially identical to the accuracy German and British bombers achieved with their own bombsights. The revolutionary American precision advantage existed primarily in carefully controlled demonstrations and in propaganda, not in actual combat over defended targets. Multiple factors explained the gap between theoretical and operational performance. Weather conditions over Europe rarely matched the clear skies and unlimited visibility of American test ranges. Cloud cover obscured targets. Industrial haze from factories made identification difficult. Smoke from previous bombing runs drifted across target areas. Even when weather permitted visual bombing, bombardiers often struggled to identify specific buildings or facilities from 25,000 feet through narrow telescopes. Combat conditions added layers of difficulty that testing never replicated. German anti-aircraft artillery, or flak, forced bombers to fly at maximum altitude and take evasive action during approach. The Norden required steady, level flight on a constant heading for several minutes during the bombing run. Maintaining such predictable flight paths over heavily defended targets invited concentrated flak that could destroy entire formations. Pilots had to balance the bombardier's need for stable conditions against the crew's need to survive the mission. German fighter attacks compounded these problems. Messerschmitt and Focke-Wulf fighters pressed attacks with determination, forcing bomber formations to maintain tight defensive boxes that prioritized mutual fire support over individual bombing accuracy. The violent maneuvering required to evade fighters, the turbulence from other bombers flying in close formation, and the psychological stress of combat all degraded the bombardier's ability to operate the sensitive Norden effectively. Most fundamentally, the Norden's design assumed bombardiers could identify and track specific aim points throughout the bombing run. In practice, targets often became visible only seconds before release. Bombardiers operating under combat stress, wearing heavy flight gear, enduring temperatures far below zero, and watching tracers and flak bursts fill the sky around their unarmored nose compartment, rarely achieved the calm precision that testing assumed. Luftwaffe intelligence officers interviewing captured American bombardiers confirmed what German technical analysis had suggested. The Norden was difficult to operate under ideal conditions and nearly impossible to use to its full potential in combat. Bombardiers described the device as temperamental, requiring constant adjustment and perfect conditions to function as designed. Many admitted they could not see their targets clearly enough through the telescope to achieve the precision American propaganda claimed. Formation bombing, where entire groups dropped when the lead bombardier released, had become standard practice because individual accuracy was too unreliable. By late 1943, hundreds of B-17 seconds had been shot down over occupied Europe. German recovery teams had collected dozens of Norden bombsights in various states of preservation. Some were destroyed as training prescribed. Others arrived relatively intact, having been recovered from crash sites before crews could activate thermite grenades. Luftwaffe technical specialists examined each captured example, looking for modifications or improvements that might explain American bombing results. What they found confirmed the original assessment from December 1942. American bombardiers were using the same Mark 7 Norden design with only minor updates. Manufacturing quality remained excellent, but the device offered no performance advantages that would justify the extraordinary security measures or explain why American bombing accuracy was supposedly superior. In fact, operational analysis showed German and American bombing accuracy were essentially equivalent when measured across large numbers of missions. The Luftwaffe 7 bombsight, serving in Luftwaffe bombers, achieved circular error probables around 1,200 feet under combat conditions, identical to the Norden's operational performance. Both bombsights achieved their theoretical accuracy in testing. Both performed far worse in combat. The determining factors were not the bombsights themselves, but the operational environment. Weather, altitude, defensive measures, and the inherent difficulty of identifying small targets from 5 miles up while under fire. German engineers preparing reports on captured American equipment could not understand why the United States had invested over $1 billion in developing and producing the Norden, when comparable technology cost a fraction of that amount. The Luftwaffe 7 development and production program cost perhaps 10% of what America spent on the Norden. German industry produced bombsights adequate for their needs without the massive infrastructure, specialized facilities, and elaborate security that characterized the American program. Part of the answer lay in different strategic doctrines. Germany had committed to tactical bombing supporting ground forces, dive bombing against specific targets, and later in the war, retaliatory strikes against British cities. Precision high-altitude strategic bombing was never central to German military strategy. The Luftwaffe needed competent bomb sites for tactical operations, not revolutionary precision for strategic campaigns. The Luftwaffe 7 adequately served German needs without requiring extraordinary investment. America's strategic doctrine, by contrast, depended on precision strategic bombing as a war-winning strategy. The Army Air Force's entire justification for independence from the Army rested on demonstrating that air power could achieve decisive strategic effects. Precision bombing promised to destroy enemy industrial capacity while minimizing civilian casualties, making it politically acceptable to President Roosevelt and to American public opinion that strongly opposed area bombing of cities. The Norden Bombsight became the technological foundation for this strategic vision. It had to be revolutionary because the entire doctrine of precision strategic bombing required revolutionary accuracy. The security measures reflected not just the device's actual capabilities, but its symbolic importance to American military strategy. Admitting the Norden performed no better in combat than German or British bomb sites would undermine the justification for the strategic bombing campaign and the Army Air Force's claims to decisively influence the war outcome. So the security measures continued. The bombsight vaults remained under armed guard. Bombardiers still took their oaths. Thermite grenades stayed installed. German intelligence reports documenting that the Norden offered no significant advantages remained classified in Luftwaffe archives, unavailable to American intelligence. Each side operated on incomplete information, unaware that the other had reached conclusions that contradicted official propaganda. The operational reality of American strategic bombing evolved to compensate for the Norden's limitations. Colonel Curtis LeMay, commanding bomber groups in the 8th Air Force, developed formation bombing techniques that maximized the system's actual capabilities rather than its theoretical potential. Lead bombardiers, the most skilled operators in each group, would aim using their Norden bombsights. The remaining bombers in the formation would drop simultaneously when the lead bomber released, concentrating hundreds of bombs on the same general target area. This approach transformed strategic bombing from individual precision strikes to concentrated area attacks. Instead of each bomber independently targeting specific buildings, entire formations saturated areas measuring thousands of feet across. The concentration increased the probability that at least some bombs would hit important facilities, even though individual accuracy remained poor. Formation bombing accepted the Norden's operational limitations and adapted tactics accordingly. By 1944, when American strategic bombing reached its peak intensity, the Norden had evolved from a precision instrument into one component of a complex system. Radar provided targeting when visibility prevented visual bombing. Formation techniques concentrated bombs despite limited individual accuracy. Increasingly effective fighter escorts reduced German interference during bombing runs. The bombing campaign achieved strategic effects through overwhelming scale and sustained effort, rather than through the precision that early proponents had promised. German intelligence officers analyzing this evolution understood what American leadership could not publicly acknowledge. The strategic bombing campaign succeeded not because American bomb sites were superior, but because American industrial capacity could sustain a campaign of such magnitude that precision became less important than volume. Thousands of bombers dropping tens of thousands of bombs per mission achieved strategic effects, even when individual accuracy remained poor. Germany simply could not match the scale of American operations, regardless of bombsight performance. Oberst Dietrich, preparing his final comprehensive report on captured American bombing technology in January 1945, included detailed analysis of multiple Norden bombsights recovered from shot-down B-17 seconds and B-24 seconds. His conclusions had not changed from his initial assessment in December 1942. The Norden was well-engineered equipment manufactured to high standards. It represented competent application of known technology. Under ideal conditions, it achieved excellent accuracy, but it offered no revolutionary capabilities and performed no better in combat than the Luftwaffe 7 at a fraction of the cost and complexity. More significantly, Dietrich observed that bombsight performance was largely irrelevant to strategic bombing effectiveness. What mattered was industrial capacity to build thousands of bombers, train thousands of crews, produce millions of bombs, and sustain operations despite losses that would have crippled smaller air forces. Germany could not compete with American scale regardless of comparative bombsight performance. Truth emerged gradually after the war ended. American intelligence officers interrogating Luftwaffe personnel discovered to their shock that Germany had possessed detailed knowledge of the Norden since 1938. German engineers explained their conclusion that the Luftwaffe 7 was actually superior for operational use. Operational research analyzing bombing accuracy confirmed that the Norden's combat performance was far below its theoretical potential. Military historians analyzing strategic bombing effectiveness later documented that only 5% of 8th Air Force bombs fell within 1,000 feet of their intended targets. The average error for 500-pound bombs dropped over Europe was 1,673 feet, more than 20 times worse than the Norden's tested accuracy. Some missions saw bombs miss their targets by miles due to navigation errors, weather conditions, or combat interference. These findings did not diminish the sacrifice and courage of bomber crews who flew some of the war's most dangerous missions. Nor did they invalidate the strategic bombing campaign's ultimate effectiveness in destroying German industrial capacity. But they did expose the gap between the Norden's promise and its performance, between security measures that assumed revolutionary technology and the reality that combat conditions negated theoretical precision. The story's final irony appeared decades after the war, when Soviet forces captured approximately 1,000 unused Luftwaffe 7 bombsights from Carl Zeiss factories in occupied Germany. The Soviets attempted to install them in B-25 Mitchell bombers, hoping to replace the more complex Norden bombsights with simpler German equipment. The project failed due to incompatibility with Soviet autopilot systems, and the Luftwaffe 7s remained in storage, a reminder that the German bombsight had actually been simpler and potentially more practical than the American device. Hermann Lang served 10 years of his 18-year sentence before being released in 1950 and deported to Germany. He had compromised America's supposedly greatest bombing secret, yet his espionage had no strategic impact because the secret was not what American security measures implied. The billion-dollar investment in Norden development and production was justified not by the device's actual capabilities, but by its symbolic importance to American strategic bombing doctrine. The German engineers who examined captured Norden bombsights recognized excellent craftsmanship applied to familiar principles. They understood that America had invested enormous resources developing equipment that performed comparably to their own simpler designs. Most significantly, they realized that bombsight performance was largely irrelevant to strategic outcomes. Industrial capacity, not technological sophistication in individual weapons, determined which nation could sustain strategic bombing campaigns of decisive magnitude. The Norden bombsight was never the secret weapon American security measures implied. German intelligence had compromised its design before the war started. German engineers concluded their own bombsight was actually superior for operational use. Combat results showed that precision was limited by factors beyond the bombsight's control. The extraordinary security measures protected not technological secrets but institutional belief in precision strategic bombing as a war-winning strategy. What the security measures actually protected was the myth that technology could make warfare precise and humane. The Norden represented hope, justification for strategic air power, and psychological comfort for crews flying dangerous missions. Most importantly, it demonstrated American industrial capacity to invest billions in single weapons systems, even when combat results did not match theoretical capabilities. The German engineers who concluded the Luftwaffe 7 was superior were technically correct. Their bombsight was simpler, cheaper, easier to maintain, and equally effective in combat. But they missed the larger point. America could afford to invest enormous resources in programs that offered only marginal improvements. That capacity to accept inefficiency in pursuit of theoretical perfection demonstrated industrial strength that Germany could never match. When Dietrich filed his final report, he He included one observation that captured the essential truth. The Norden was an excellent example of American engineering philosophy, solving difficult problems through massive application of resources rather than elegant design. The device worked adequately despite unnecessary complexity because American industry could afford the complexity. Both approaches achieved comparable combat results, but only America could sustain operations that made precision less important than volume. The Norden stands as testament to the gap between technological promise and operational reality, between theoretical capability and combat performance, between security measures based on assumed revolutionary superiority and the mundane truth that good engineering competently executed produces adequate results. The Germans tested captured Nordens, compared them to their own designs, and concluded they had built something better. History proved them right about the technical comparison, but wrong about its strategic significance. What mattered was not which bombsight was superior, but which nation could build and deploy thousands of bombers carrying millions of bombs regardless of individual precision. Thank you for watching. For more detailed historical breakdowns, check out the other videos on your screen now, and don't forget to subscribe.